Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to another edition of Breaking News. Today is Tuesday, the first day of October 2024. And in today's edition of Breaking News, we're going to concentrate on two very important headlines. First, the Third Lebanon War begins. Israel launches a ground offensive. And number two, Tehran fumbles as the world wonders about the integrity of its axis of resistance. Now, each of these headlines have huge implications with respect to last day's Bible prophecy, as we will see. All right, headline number one. Third Lebanon War begins. Israel launches a ground offensive. This is from Breitbart News. It's a great summary that they did. The Third Lebanon War has officially begun, according to Israel's Army radio, as Israel Defense Forces, the IDF, ground forces crossed into Lebanon early Tuesday morning to remove Hezbollah's outpost and that threaten Israeli communities. The IDF apparently crossed into Lebanon at the finger or panhandle of Israel's Galilee region near the town of Metula, which is Israel's northernmost town until the capture and annexation of the Golan Heights. In the statement, the IDF said the following: in accordance with the decision of the political echelon, a few hours ago, the IDF began limited, localized, and targeted ground raids based upon precise intelligence against Hezbollah's terrorist targets and infrastructure in southern Lebanon. These targets are located in villages close to the border and pose an immediate threat to Israeli communities in northern Israel. The IDF is operating according to a methodical plan set out by the General Staff and the Northern Command, in which IDF soldiers have trained and prepared for in recent months. The Israeli Air Force and the IDF artillery are supporting the ground forces with precise strikes on military targets in the area. These operations were approved and carried out in accordance with the decision of the political echelon. It's called Operation Northern Arrows. It will continue according to the situational assessment and in parallel to combat in Gaza and in other areas. The IDF is continuing to operate to achieve the goals of the war and is doing everything necessary to defend the citizens of Israel and return the citizens of northern Israel to their homes. Now, that was the IDF statement that was made today. The ground invasion began exactly 2 weeks after Israel's Security Cabinet decided to adopt a new war goal, namely, as we've talked about, the safe return of Israel's northern residents to their homes, which were they evacuated when Hezbollah opened fire on them on the 8th of October. According to Army radio, the goal of the war is not to occupy southern Lebanon or to establish a security zone, but simply to remove Hezbollah bases and positions from which terrorists have been firing on Israeli citizens, After Israel completes this particular goal in southern Lebanon, it remains unclear what they are planning to do to keep this from happening again. Now, it's important to understand this is the third time that Israel has had to go into Lebanon, first in 1982 and then in 2006. I was there during the First Lebanon War in 1992, 10 years after it started. And basically, what happened was the first time around, Israel decided to go all the way up to Beirut, take over Beirut. They actually installed a supposedly Israeli friendly government, which didn't go well in Beirut. And at that time, the fighting was very intense. And so what happened was real interesting. Our pastor, Chuck Smith, called me up on a Friday and he said, Don, we've got a guy from our church. It's going to go all the way to Beirut and do some filming, find out what's going on there. We'd like someone from our group to come and give a firsthand report. Would you like to go to Lebanon? I said, when is this? And this was on Friday. He said, well, I think it was next Monday. He goes, yeah. I said, yeah, I'm not doing anything on Monday, so I'll go to Beirut. I wasn't married in those days. Anyway, got there. It was really interesting. When we got to the border between Israel and Beirut, you had to sign all these declarations, these legal documents that your relatives aren't going to sue Israel if you get blown to bits or something like that. But anyway, we made it through. It was a really interesting situation. Just one episode kind of says it all. We were right at the border where the PLO was on the other side. It was Arafat and the PLO at that time. And you had to walk across sort of the street there to get to where we were going. And one of the Israeli guys said, you may want to walk not that slow because there are snipers on the other side. So I kind of hoofed it across pretty fast. But anyway, we survived, and that was my experience there. It was fascinating. Got still a lot of pictures of me still in Beirut in 82. But bottom line was that was the first time. The second time was 2006, the second Lebanese war, and that ended with Israel leaving. And that's when that resolution was made that It was Hezbollah at this time, had to move back some 18 miles from the border beyond the Litani River. Well, nobody paid any attention to that. The United Nations didn't enforce it. They didn't move back. And that they've been there since 2006, building their tunnels and getting ready for what's happening right now. So anyway, here's where we're at. As was true in Gaza, it remains to be seen again what the final outcome is going to be where Israel's security is assured after the fighting ends. What we do know is from scripture there will eventually be an invasion of Israel. We know that, led by Russia and joined by others, including Iran and Turkey. Such an invasion, this is really key, such an invasion is certainly not imminent. Many things have to fall into place for this to happen. Therefore, it is wrong to claim that the fulfillment of Ezekiel 38:39 is right around the corner. It is not. Now, for information on what exactly will take place, see our books, 25 Signs. We're near the end, signs number 9 to 11, and then as well as an entire book we've written on the subject, Ezekiel 38:39 invasion. They're both free downloads from our website, Educating Our World, under the heading of Bible Prophecy, where we go into great detail and explain what's going on. So the war has begun. The Operation Northern Arrow, and we'll see what happens and how it all turns out. All right, headline number 2, and this is the one also too that has tremendous implications for last day's Bible prophecy, something we've talked about for quite a while here. The headline says it all. Tehran fumbles as the world wonders about the integrity of its axis of resistance. This is from Ynet News. International outlets raise doubt about Tehran's decades-long project across the Middle East, reporting that it is crumbling amid Nasrallah's assassination. International reports have been covering Israel's war since October 7, 2023, which has also involved its conflict against Iran-backed Hezbollah on the northern border. Now, with Hezbollah's leadership decimated and amidst IDF entrance into Lebanon, the outlets are wondering whether Tehran's axis of resistance, made up of its proxies across the Middle East, is falling apart. And the answer is, it certainly is falling apart. Iran came up with the strategy and invested tremendous resources to build each other's groups' fighting abilities and connect them to one another. A New York Times article on the topic published on Monday read, but as the Axis response, as Israel has pummeled Hezbollah and Lebanon in recent weeks, killing many of its commanders and assassinating its leader, has so far been feeble, suggesting that the Axis is weaker and more fragmented than many in the region had expected, and that Iran feared that widening the war could cause Israel to turn its firepower on Tehran, it added. And that's exactly what's going on. It's very feeble, very weak response, and they're scared to death that Israel's going to go and get them next. Now, we'll be talking about that down the line here, what's going to happen next. Now, according to the American outlet, the idea was simple. When a big war with Israel broke out, all the members of the Iranian-backed network of militias in the Middle East, known as the Axis of Resistance, would join the fight in a coordinated push towards their shared goal of destroying the Jewish state. Hezbollah was a senior member of the Iran Axis, and the terror organization's Secretary General Nasrallah, who was killed on a Israeli strike last week, was the leading figure. He had close ties to Iran, and he served as a role model for leaders and other pro-Iranian militias. According to the outlet, his assassination badly shook the remaining members of the Axis, who were likely unprepared for Hezbollah to suffer such significant losses. At this point, the international community still hasn't fully understood why other members of Iran's alliance didn't aid Hezbollah in recent weeks. It appears that most of them believe that the Shiite terror organization from Lebanon could hold its own against Israel. Additionally, Iran's vague and unclear response following the strike has left doubts in other members of Tehran's spiderweb. The New York Times reviewed the involvement of these militias and noted it took Syria 2 days to issue a statement about Nasrallah's death, despite Hezbollah sending thousands of terrorists to help them fight the country's civil war, which set off in 2011. Hamas, after a year of fighting in Gaza, is incapable of doing much to help. Yemen's Houthis and militias in Syria and Iraq launched attacks on Israel or U.S. bases in the Middle East, but most were thwarted. 2 pro-Iranian militia commanders in Iraq said they had received no instructions from Iran on how to respond. Everyone was still in shock with the Nasrallah killing. NBC also addressed the issue in an article titled, "Is Iran's Axis of Resistance Collapsing Under Israeli Attacks?" In an extensive report on the activities of Iran's pro-Iranian militias, The outlet wrote that Israeli airstrikes had wiped out Hezbollah's top leadership and left its internal security in tatters are a devastating blow to get this to Iran's decades-long project. This has all been decades in the making. What has happened with Hezbollah, the Houthis, they're in Syria, they're in Iraq. In other words, it took them decades to get to this place, and now it's all unraveling. And so this is what's been very frustrating. The project, according to former U.S. intelligence officials, which spoke with NBC, took decades to build, aimed to project power in the Middle East via Iran's proxy network. Iran viewed Hezbollah as a cornerstone of its strategic plan to arm proxies in various regions across the Middle East. In addition to arming Hezbollah and terror groups in Gaza, militias in Israel, Syria, and Yemen were also armed, allowing Iran to one day attack Israel through its proxies and avoid direct confrontation. That was the goal. Iran could say, hey, we have nothing to do with it because all its proxies are attacking Israel with intent on destruction. Well, the problem is the heavy blows that Israel started hitting with the Houthis and in Gaza, then now in Lebanon. The militia in Yemen has made numerous threats against Israel since the war began, and they would hit significantly just recently. Iran's militias and Syria and Iraq have suffered tremendous blows. And now, of course, the Supreme Leader Khamenei said following the death of the terror chief, Nasrallah said, the fate of the region will be determined by the forces of resistance with Hezbollah at the forefront. Well, the problem is Hezbollah has been neutered, and they're getting more and more neutered. So what's going to happen here? What's going to happen next? All right, so here's where we're at right now. Simply put, after decades of preparation, Iran has failed to put together a coalition that will destroy Israel. Just that simple. Okay. Instead, its own limited capabilities are exposed for all the world to see. And as we have repeatedly said here, this is precisely the scenario that we have expected to see. It will not be Iran, it will be Russia at some time in the future that will invade Israel to the place where divine intervention is needed for Israel's survival. Now, we are certainly not at that place yet, nor are we even near to it. So do not let anyone ever tell you otherwise. For an explanation of why that's the case, see our book, 25 Signs We're Near the End, Appendix 5, which says, would a regional war between Israel and Iran fulfill Bible prophecy? And the answer is it would not. And so what we're seeing here is a precursor for what's eventually going to happen in Israel with an attack from the north led by Russia in the last days, which would include Turkey and Iran as surrogates, but not as the leaders. And so things have to radically change, and they will radically change. Iran's axis of evil is becoming dismembered, disbanding, just because it, as good as they thought of it was, Israel's capabilities are better. So this is not going to be the end. This is not Ezekiel 38, 39. This is setting the stage for something that will happen in the future. So Israel will have to do what it can to bring peace and stabilization to the northern part of its country. And we know from Scripture very clearly, Ezekiel 38 tells us that when they are eventually invaded, they're at peace and they think everything's fine. Their guard is let down. They think we're in control of all this. And then there's this invasion that takes place where it looks like, and it actually would have happened without supernatural intervention by the Lord himself, that Israel would have been overrun by the hordes of boots on the ground soldiers that will enter the land there with the desire to take out Israel. And that's when God supernaturally intervenes and destroys all the armies that come from the north, south, east, and west against Israel. So here we are, two huge headlines. The invasion of Lebanon has started, the Third Lebanese War with Israel. And number two, Iran, the axis of evil, it looks very weak. Right now, it looks impotent because it's not doing anything, and everybody's kind of shocked with all that's gone on, particularly in the last 2 weeks. So Israel's going to have its way. We'll see what happens. We'll see how it all ends up, what type of security zone, if anything, Israel does in the north, in the southern Lebanon, the 18-mile stretch from the border to the Litani rivers to keep this from happening again. So all this remains to be seen, but the good news is it's following right what we said what's going to happen. Again, that's the nice thing about knowing Bible prophecy. You know what's going to happen in the future because the Lord tells you, and this was not going to be the war to end all wars, not at all. God still has future plans for Israel, for Russia, for all these other countries. So please stay tuned as we will document this. We'll be back again later today with another edition of Breaking News, and we're going to mention why it's possible Iran will get hit soon because Netanyahu just sent a message out to Iran, to the people of Iran, about how they're going to be free very soon. So this may be portending something that's going to happen with respect to an Israeli attack. We'll talk about that on our next edition of Breaking News. Until then, I'm Don Stewart. Thanks for watching, and may the Lord, as always, richly, richly bless.